Thank you, everyone. We've got the graveyard shift just after lunch, maybe just before a break, a tea break. But thank you, everyone, for coming and joining us on this panel. We've got a good mix of brands as well as technology companies, as well as companies that use technology to enable businesses as well out here. So hopefully we'll have a mixed bag of a discussion. Feel free to put your hands up in between during the discussion as well. Let's not wait till the end only for any questions. But let me very quickly introduce the panel. Actually, she's already done the introduction of the panel, so I don't need to introduce anyone there. So we can just get started directly. I think the topic is around technology in retail and what experiences does a customer and a brand build using technology. I think we'll start off with that as the first one. The oldest technology in retail is usually point of sale systems, payments, POS, whatever you want to call it, an ERP. But beyond that, still in the store, what has been done? Like, we still don't see too much of technology going on in the stores. So start off with the retailers on the panel first. What is there beyond just the POS that you consider as a technology innovation in your store? Start off with Sanjay bhai first.
So hi, I would be pretty sorry to kind of disappoint you here. As far as Spykar is concerned, we kind of quite nascent in our evolution as far as bringing technology into the store is concerned. So I think while there's so much to be done and so much is being done by many people, brands like ours, who are vanilla in nature, have limited ability to kind of bring on as much as we would like to bring. And from that perspective, while it's good to say that I want to be as ahead in the space as possible, sometimes practically a lot of things can't happen. So I would say that I have limited Spykar and myself to absolute hygiene as far as tech is concerned in my stores. But yeah, there is a lot of happening within the organization. But on the storefront, I think we are pretty small, not just from the size of the organization, but the format is small. So it's a 600, 700,000 square feet store, which really doesn't need many interventions on tech in that sense. So I'm very sorry to start with this very disappointed feedback.
I think very real one, actually. Sugam, coming to you on the same one, what are some of the things that you all have done that has not worked? What are some of the things that have worked? And if you were to do it again, what would you, or how would you do it?
So I think we've tried a lot of things, starting from these trial mirrors and things like that, which are a part of the initiative that started, I think, around 3-4 years back, and then apparently it started to fade and all of that because the customer was not getting interacted with in the right way, or the customer was not able to feel how the garment would actually look like. So that's one, but I would not like to revisit it. The other set is, I think, the main interaction between the fashion consultant and the customer is a space that we should be able to enable technology and provide the right and relevant information regarding products to the customer. We are a service-oriented set of brands, so obviously we like that interaction between the fashion consultant and the customer. But having said that, we have almost 400 styles in the store at one point of time. Expecting the fashion consultant to know the trends, to know the fabrics, to know the retail price points, to know the taste of that customer, what would fit that customer, is almost impossible, right? And Sanjay would agree, the kind of attrition that we see in Indian retail, I think by the time you teach a teach a fashion consultant that this is what is right, I think that person has already changed. So I think that interaction or that knowledge that we are transferring to the customer to sell the product that is ours is something where I would like to see some intervention, which as of now, I think it's relatively at a far nascent stage.
Coming to Niraj. Niraj, you guys have looked at technology from a data and analytics perspective for quite some time now for brands across the spectrum. What are you seeing beyond just the sales data in how retailers are using analytics to become better?
Sure. So I think sales, like you mentioned, sales is always linked with inventory. So when we look at sales, we're looking at sales and inventory together. So it's merchandise data as a whole, sales, inventory, supply chain, that comes in. I think the data points don't change that much. What really changes is utilization of that data. So, you know, we talk about evolution. You move from being data cultured to what we call data literate. Use cases have evolved, right? Personalization is something that happens, you know, is like we say hygiene today, and I'll talk more about that later. But recommendations, it is the art of automating decisions which can be rule-based and avoiding manual intervention in doing drudgery that can easily be done by a machine. So I think algorithms that we talk about, I think these are big words we all use. It's very simple. You use rules to decide what I should send where, what is selling where and therefore needs to go to which store. We've automated rules to help you decide that faster, because as a brand, as a retailer, if you've got 100 stores, you've got 600 SKUs, the multiplication of deciding 60,000 line items per day, every day, is complex. It's not complex, it's manual drudgery. And all that can easily get automated. So I think that's where Indian retailers are starting to make that shift of saying, let me use manpower to do more elevated work rather than do the manual drudgery that they've been used to.
So Sanjay bhai said about keeping it hygiene and ensuring that you do the basics right. Niraj speaks about how you automate things in order to elevate how a customer is served by the store associate, which even Sugam said that the one large area that he wants to look at is how can the store associate serve a consumer better. And in order to serve a consumer better, create a personalized shopping experience for the customer. And I think historically, personalization in retail has been done at a local segment level. You look at that catchment and you know what you put in the store for that catchment. But Anshu, you've done both planning for offline and now e-com as well. How do you get personalization and beyond just localization for a brand?
Okay, when we talk about localization, yes, it's an Australian brand. So there is a limited scope of localization. Having said that, with the help of technology and data of our customers, we understood that the average height of an Indian woman is less than 5'3". And the silhouettes and the styles we were getting were the Australian fit. So data and technology really helped us to understand the customer and design a completely different range called the Petite, which is now in stores. And it's been doing extremely well. Almost 25% of our contribution comes from a small range. So technology helped us understand the customer and then localize the range as per the need. Also, we understood that the reason why our customers are moving out of the store is because they are finding the silhouettes slightly more edgy. So we understood, again, technology helped us understand that taste. And now we have small little things, like we've put just a button here, so that the plunging neckline is taken care of. So this is from a product level point of view. Coming to personalization, as basic technology as a WhatsApp call is being used tremendously. The store associate calls the customer on the WhatsApp call, shows the store, and almost 14% of our revenue is coming from home shopping. So basic, I agree, basic technology, but putting the right logic and idea behind it actually has worked for us.
Nissan, I think Metro's a legend when it comes to the width of styles on offer in order to cater to every single price point as well as taste point of a consumer. I think personalization is a cause or an effect of that mindset, or is it done with a particular structure in place?
Well, I think the structure that we use technology for is converting data into information, and that information into knowledge, and that knowledge into the basis for making decisions, right? So very simply put, in the Northeast, in locations like Shillong or Guwahati, we were selling a lot of smaller sizes, right? Now, that information, as somebody down the sitting 2 seats from me said, is very acrimonious to pull out. But when it spits out at you as information, and then you can use that as a basis for knowledge and a basis for decision, that becomes a lot more exciting. And that's where we feel it's not personalization at the customer level, it's personalization at the backend level. See, when a customer goes to a store, and I respect the guy from Spykar Jeans that said he's not using much in his store. Honestly, that's great. I go to a damn store, I don't want technology, I want humans. Right? I want humans to wait on me, I want interaction with humans, I want humans to suggest. Let them use technology in the back end if they figure out I'm a frequent shopper, I like navy blue, or I like black, or whatever the color is. But I want a personal interaction, I want personal service. And what we've seen after the pandemic especially is people rushing back to stores and don't want to interface with technology. I know retailers that have opened up with VRs and touchpads. It sits there collecting dust. People come in, we want live interactions, and that's what I think is going to win always. But technology on the back end is critical.
And you spoke about how certain cities and areas is what the data tells you about specific tastes of that region. However, I don't think India, you can look at a city on a whole level. I think you've got so much heterogeneity in a single area. But I think I'd like to get Bertram in out here and say that across the country, no matter what pin code or what city you go to, you've got such a large variety of consumer choices and tastes. How does one go about understanding and scaling to all of India as one, or as many as well? How do you set up the systems in order to drive that localization, personalization as well?
I think that's a great question. At the heart of what we do at Protean is not just solving for one particular format. I think what we are more keen on solving at a national level is building data standards and creating an interoperable framework. So some of what we do, you're familiar with the whole ONDC background story. But beyond what we do for ONDC, we see a huge potential. If I were to give you an example of rural commerce, today a number of the brands and some of our fellow panelists would be excited to know that in rural India there's a huge demand for B2B wholesale purchasing, but they don't have access to brands, they don't have access to discovery. They would love to find ways to place bulk orders, they would love to find ways logistics can actually deliver to them. So at a unit level or at a block level in rural India, how do we solve for localization there is what we are really going after. And ONDC is trying to solve a very large mission statement problem, saying today our digital commerce in India is just 6 to 7%. How do we at least double that? If we don't aspire to get to 90%, how do we take the 6 to 12? And I think some of these interoperable standards will give rise to a lot of innovation, not by one company, but we would love to work with the entire ecosystem and help scale these solutions across the entire geography of the country.
And then as you start moving wider on the pyramid, as you start going to so many different regions and areas, which means that as ecosystems develop, you would look at a large amount of trained workforce or even untrained, semi-skilled workforce coming in. I think, Nirmit, you guys run a fairly large platform that does blue-collar workers. How do you start looking at filling all these gaps at all geographical levels?
Right. No, I think so. This gets very interesting because, say, by today, the Indian retail industry, as I said earlier, right, they have employed 35 million people across the board. By 2030, we will need 25 more million people. And you talked about attrition, so now you add attrition to it, so it just gets harder and harder. So one thing, and it is not also the volume, the relevancy kind of also matters. As we go and look into, say, skills, right? Say today, when somebody interacts with me, when I go to a store and somebody is interacting with me, somebody is somewhere interacting with my brand. Or if I'm talking to somebody on the customer support side for an online portal, again, they're interacting with my brand. So so these people are also going to be the extension to the brand. So what we have started doing is, we have started building skill tags to understand empathy, to understand customer obsession. We are also adding skill tags to understand that, oh, do these people can speak good English? And when we go and do this, the matching just gets better and better. We work with almost 440,000 employers across the country. And we are seeing this crazy trend as more and more organizations are expanding to T2, T3 cities. Today, we have 16 million users or candidates from T2, T3 cities. And that allows us to kind of do the job matching and everything better. So I think it's more like volume. Along with volume, you are going to solve for relevancy. And along with relevancy, whatever skill tags which are missing, we're actually working with industry partners to go and train the workforce. And it has to be an ecosystem play if we really want to solve this problem.
Sanjay bhai, how many stores does Spykar have?
So we have close to 300 now.
Mix of franchisees, non-franchise.
Every
COCO
single
stores?
one is a franchisee, and that's probably the reason why I have an entrepreneur sitting out of every store who's mindful of what's happening at the store, you know.
So as you start going to more and more number of stores across the country, how do you keep getting access to that entrepreneur, and how do you ensure that the entrepreneur is also optimizing for, say, a standardized set of metrics and living up to the Spykar brand?
So there is a dichotomy at play over here, in a way, because common sense says that probably every intent doesn't match, of the franchisee versus the brand, and which is true. So from that perspective, the brand has kind of built in a level of expectation or moderation of level of expectation from the franchisee. Having said this, there are quite a few things that I would probably desire out of bringing tech into my store to solve some problems of ours. One of the problems which I'm hearing over here is the training aspect of the staff. And for me, it becomes all the more critical because that staff is not on my payroll in the first place. So in some ways, I don't have control over the staff. So and I think, so for a brand like ours, where I fight on a daily basis with a lot of international brands, and probably amongst the only Indian brand in the jeans segment. So it makes it all the more difficult for our people to stand out versus the international labels. And so the knowledge of the product and the salient features and aspects of the product, they really need to be kind of ingrained and also facilitated to be conveyed to the consumers. So I think these are areas which we are surely grappling with, and the model which we are currently using has its own limitation in some ways. I feel that there will be some intervention on tech, and we are discussing things with a lot of people over here. Even with you, we've run a very successful project on Omni, and I think from a intent perspective, the brand is quite keen to kind of employ as much tech as possible to solve our problems. But I just don't want to do it for the sake of saying that, there's a tick box for me over here. I genuinely want the problems to be resolved and solved. We are in talks with quite a few people over here to kind of help us on the same. But I think, when an entrepreneur comes into play, there is a sense of ownership which also comes in, which I've seen that kind of takes care of certain negatives of being franchised versus a company-run store, One, we are very small, so we can't really employ and deploy a lot of people on HR everywhere. And so from HR perspective, a lot of problems are resolved because it's a franchisee-led operation. So I think it's got its own pros and cons. We are living with it.
From 100% of 300 stores as franchisees, we come to Nissan's brand, who is 700 stores and only 1% franchise, 99% COCO. But I remember, because Rafiq Bhai used to keep saying that every single store associate in the store is an entrepreneur trying to sell the store, trying to sell a shoe to a customer. How do you still get that scale and standardization across so many stores? And I'm sure there'll be plans to go to 1,500 stores, to 5,000 stores in the next few years. How do you start creating those systems to scale that organization?
All right, first of all, no forward-looking statements. Okay.
Sorry.
But having said that, though, what technology allows you to do is aggregate multiple ones. As opposed to coming up with a sum of 10, you can actually look at 10 individuals as 10 individuals, but it still adds up to 10. So it looks at the individuality of a store and then aggregates up and points out the individuality. Of course, there's a big difference between our store in Ghatkopar versus Gorakhpur, right? And we know that difference. Part of it is institutional knowledge. Part of it is just being in the business that long as Rafiq. You know everything about this country. But part of it is the fact that we spend a lot of money in technology for integrated pieces. So when I looked at what we spent in technology this fiscal year, most of it has been for integration of systems we already have in place. But that's the beauty of technology. That kind of that level of integration. What is Power BI, for example? You know, it's an integration of all your data and in a one source where you can see it. We have a new HRIS coming on board. It's integrating your employee lifecycle journey along with their performance, and it's all about integrating technologies across the board. We're not buying a whole lot of new technologies. There's not a whole lot of amazing new technologies. Yes, there's AI. Yes, there's a lot of things. But what is AI at the end of it all? It's integrating data. It's integrating technologies. It's bringing together. ChatGPT is just getting stuff together. So the integrated nature also creates a democratic nature for technology, which a lot of retailers can use. But it also allows you to look at individualism inside that aggregated data. That's how we get started. We have some terrific, the secret is we have some terrific store managers and people back at the office.
I like how you focus a lot on the integration plan. I think Bertram, what you guys are doing at Protean, and also the history of NSDL, eGov. How does one go about ensuring that the platform is composable, modular, integratable, and have the right partners to not mess around with the system, but actually to build and leverage the system?
Some of the challenges we work with are how to scale from serving 500 million people to 1 billion people. The second problem we are solving for is how do we build systems which are 15,000 TPS upwards, transactions per second. Those are the kind of challenges which we have to grapple with at the kind of scale at what we are building. But the interesting and amazing opportunity is at this juncture, retail, and I hear a lot of my panelists speak about technology being at the core of everything that we do, is something which is inevitable. I think the one piece which is still very nascent, yet to really take shape, is the ability to digitize value chains completely end-to-end. How do you allow brands to become much more discoverable to consumers? How do you allow the goods to flow between the retailer, distributor, and the OEM? How do you bring in the choice, and how do you build in supply chain financing at each stage of this movement of goods and supply? So that's something which we're very interested in, and we're looking at solving some of these problems with technology at scale. We understand in the world that ONDC is trying to create, setting standards is going to be of utmost importance. So we are looking at things like catalog as a service, where an entire catalog from various OEMs can eventually be hosted in a single unified place and OEM approved, brand approved. And if a seller tomorrow wants to link your products and link your SKUs, they just be able to type it in like a search, and it will just bring out all your products, and you can just click on them and get them linked. So we are trying to create flexibility in the underlying building blocks, and the innovation is then left for everyone here to solve the problem. So that's my 2 cents.
So there are a bunch of technologies which are ecosystem driven, certain implementations that are done at the organization level, that puts immense expectation on the staff to actually adopt and utilize it well. Anshu, how do you go about identifying forward-looking skill sets that you need to inculcate in your staff, both at the office level as well as customer-facing level, to utilize technology effectively? How does hiring change for you? How does training change for you? How does engagement change for you? How do incentive structures change for you?
It's a very interesting question. So 70% of our business comes from brick and mortar. So earlier when we hired, we looked at the selling skill of a person. How will she be able to engage with the customer, sell her the right dress, recommend the right product. But as we moved from just pure selling to an omni structure, our hiring needs changed. We faced a lot of challenge at the store level because of the mindset of the sales associate. She was hired only to serve the customer, and here she is packing the orders for a faceless customer. And she wasn't very ready for that. And coupled with very small stock rooms, it became really crazy for her to actually do both the jobs together. But yes, we did intervene. We've changed our hiring process. We put the expectations right from the beginning, right expectations in front of her right from the beginning. Also put incentive put right incentives. So we incentivize every order that she's packing, every sale that she's making. So yes, a few things changed. We started interviewing people based not only on the selling skills, but also their adaptability and flexibility. So yeah, a few things changed post-COVID and during COVID also.
Sugam, that was a very key part of what you were looking forward to, is the ability to do clienteling in the store as well as distance selling as well. How does that change hiring for you? And from a training perspective also, what are some of the things that Bestseller has done in order to keep the staff in pace with the technology that the brand is looking to deploy?
So the most important part is to have the right HRMS or HRIS. I think we recently changed one, and that's how the entire process of right from taking interviews or getting the right person on board to training the person who's there at the shop front, and then eventually, of course, the entire process of the customer journey and how the fashion consultant is attached to that journey is something that we are looking at. Is what we are looking at right from the beginning to the end. Having said that, I think the entire conversation is moving about training that staff or training that fashion consultant to serve the customer better. I think what we are really not speaking about, and which we believe is the next wave, is how to train the customer itself. How do you get more information in the hands of the customer before the customer enters the store? How can you make sure that the customer already knows what he or she is looking for before he or she enters the store and shows you, this is what I want? With the peaks and troughs that we have in retail, with the weekends becoming heavier and with smaller retail spaces, how do you ensure that the customer gets what they want while he or she is amongst, let's say, 10 times or 20 times the more set of customers that a fashion consultant can handle? It's giving the power to the customer itself to know what they want. And a couple of things that we are doing at that front is having smart QR codes on products as well as about the brand, sending data about the brand, something related to WhatsApp commerce. That is something that we are going deep into. So I think to put it all together, I think it's more important to give more information in the hands of the customer than the fashion consultant, because that we've tried is something that probably will not happen to the perfect sense of what we like. So that's what we are doing now. Our entire customer journey is more towards how to give more knowledge and power to the customer than actually us as fashion consultants.
So, it's funny, we're looking at hiring a new driver at home. And the first question we actually asked our driver was, do you know how to use Google Maps? As opposed to saying, what car you drive or anything, was, do you know how to use Google Maps, right? And that's the expectation that now everyone's have from staff. Nirmit, have you faced any such whimsical anecdotes when you're dealing with retail clients as to, from a hiring perspective in the store level, how do they go about the business now versus, say, a few years ago?
Right. No, I think so. Very interesting. So we have a 20 people skill taxonomy team inside Apna. We work with north of 3,000 plus skill tags. And the skill tags keep changing every single month. Say, for example, if somebody is doing warehousing, पहले तो warehousing वाले बंदे को क्या करना था? He was supposed to go and just pick up, manage stuff, but now he's interacting with an ERP software. A lot of times he's also interacting with an inventory software which goes and talks to an e-commerce giant. So now what we have done is for every single hire, every single job role, we keep adding the skill tags. And whenever even the candidate comes on the app, we also ask if have you worked with this skill tags. So whenever the match happens, we know that this is more like a match made in heaven. So this expectation setting which you talked about kind of starts working on day zero itself, and you are hiring people as. So that's the first thing. And that has allowed us to do so. Today we do north of 121 job interviews every single minute with all the skill tags. So, and that technology allows us to go and enable that. We do like almost 15 million job interviews, only skill tag based today on the platform every single month. The second thing which we are doing, and I know that gets very interesting as I'm hearing a bigger problem is, how do you go and have these people be extension of the brand? And just double clicking that every organization has an L&D and training center. Spykar would have one, Metro would have one, most of the companies would have one, which is generally considered to be a cost center. As a CEO, you generally don't want to invest much. I'm going to be intellectually honest here in this panel. And the question is, how do I help you make the revenue center? For example, think about this Spykar and Metro brand course, which college graduates can take. And so when they come on the once, it's more like a quick 1 month course they take. So whenever they are hired, they know, okay, I've taken this Spykar or Metro band certificate course. And of course, that allows these brands to hire first. But then if not, the person has learned a life skill which this person can go and utilize. So now come April, we are going to launch, because I think so nobody can train better barista than Starbucks or Pete's Coffee. And we are going to launch around 100 odd courses with all these industry stalwarts across each industry, and so that you will get trained talents.
Sanjay, what does this mean from a talent in the head office? What are some of the areas where when a retailer has to become more technology enabled to serve the customers, what are these centers of excellences that now need to develop internally in the company itself, as a retailer, as a brand?
Try this.
Hello. Yeah. So I think at what stage in your journey you are is a lot which kind of will dictate this. For a brand which has been for a long time, obviously will have a lot of people within the fold who have been with them for a long time, and so probably they are not as adept on technology as probably the newer age people would. So I think it's a mixed bag over here, and I for sure would kind of segregate my teams into buckets where there is a need for a stronger affinity to tech versus not. You know, there are in our businesses, there are areas which are much more demanding on the knowledge of tech or the mindset that you need to have to adapt to the changing environments, versus certain areas which are more traditional, more conventional. So I would have very different yardsticks with respect to the kind of people I hire and what I really look at when I hire them. So it's
some change in your organization structure that you've done in the last 1-2 years, which you would not have thought of doing, but you were forced to do.
So this was something which I had done with you only. We ran a project of Omni with Harsh, and so the one important change that we did there was that the Omni team was reporting into my retail team and not to the tech or the e-commerce team. What it actually meant was that the nuisance which Omni creates creates a nuisance at the store level. And if that whole nuisance is actually getting credited to the store, then the store is very kind of aligned to that nuisance and they kind of ignore that nuisance. But if it was more e-commerce, and then it's kind of seen as if there is a set, people are kind of trespassing, So here there's no trespassing happening at Spykar. The Omni reports in. So these are certain small changes, I think it's more commonsensical in that sense. I mean, and if you think through, and I don't think solutions are tailor-made, or rather solutions need to be tailor-made for each organization, depending on how the organization is. So yeah, I mean, there are quite a few, but this just comes to my mind, especially when you are on the panel with me.
Nissan, same to you. As an organization, what are some of the new skill sets that you need to build?
Well, I think technology is obvious, but let me just pause for a second and turn the lens around, right? I think it's how does an employer look at an employee today? And we need to be acutely aware that N-2 generation was all, you've heard this, N-2 generation was all about roti, kapda makan. And then it became standard of living. I want a nice car, I want a nice house. And now it's all about quality of life, right? So engagement surveys is something that we've never ever done before. We're starting to do engagement surveys. We're starting to invest in people. So it's not about structural changes, it's about structural attitudinal changes. When we're looking at our employees differently and definitely seeing them as assets, knowing fully well that this is a taxi cab generation. They're in this cab for 2 years, they could jump in the next cab for 2 years. That's okay. You got to live with that, and you got to hold on because you give them the right reasons to stay. But it's really about turning that lens around and then using technology and structure where needed. You know, L&D is a big department today that was never there in retail before, except at the store front line. Now it's also in our back office, and as I said, in engagement surveys. HRIS has become very big to connect all the dots, all the way from productivity, if that's at the store level, down to is an employee's well-being happening, connecting it back to the engagement score. So it's not about structure in terms of, you know, now, of course, you have the whole e-com piece, which is new, that kind of tacks on and adds another node on your corporate structure. However, that's not a fundamental shift. The fundamental shift is the attitudinal approach to how you look at employees and how you look at their employee life cycle.
Anshu's nodding her head.
Yeah, because 65% of our workforce are women. So there are special policies for young mothers, older mothers. So there is a lot of flexibility. Again, I agree with Nissan that attitude needs to change. As long as they are productive at work, they can work from home. So yes, a lot of things have to change and tailor-made as per the organization.
But from a technology perspective, because of the increase in use, has there been an organizational structural change that you all have driven at Forever New in order to make life better?
The technology piece, yes. The e-commerce team, I would say not really. The structural change hasn't happened. Other than, yes, there's a tech. The tech department is now big and very important. Earlier it was just a support function, but now it's a driver. So yeah, the hiring, so that's the bit that has changed.
Sugam, for Bestseller?
So we are in the world of fashion, right? That too fast fashion, at least my organization. Fashion, ideally, if you see it historically, has always been a gut call, right? That what is right for the customer. I think training the buyers or the buying team to using tools which help them take right decision is the most difficult, if I were to say. They would still like to stick with their gut, but there are enough tools available, and we are using enough tools to ensure that there is a certain amount of sensibility that's attached to buying and data attached to buying, and it's not just a gut call. So that's where our lives are changing, because as the organization grows, as personalization grows, as customization grows, it's impossible for a buyer to decide for both, let's say, Gurgaon and Gorakhpur, So that's where data comes in, and that's where you have far less leftovers, and your efficiency increases. So that's been the most difficult part, changing the mindset and the attitudes of buyers of taking gut calls versus informed calls.
Niraj, you do this from the outside in, where you're providing the data to the retailers in order to hopefully enable them to make these calls. Have you seen any change in the way retailers now work with you, or what functions work with you versus what they used to 5-10 years ago?
Yeah, definitely. I think the change has in fact been transformational. So Nissan mentioned that the journey in any organization for analytics is moving from data to information to insights to action, right? The retailers I've seen, I'm glad it's worked for Metro, but I would say 99% of the retailers know that this is great theory, very difficult to practice. What we started 15 years ago as a tech company, today we don't call ourselves a tech company because we believe we are retail enablers. And the tool, the tech, the platform is there, it's maturing, and that will work. I think what our challenges are in the company is to actually bring culture change in an organization to adapt to the technology. And we have to understand as tech providers that we should not expect the users of our technology to change based on the technology. We have to understand that we have to change our technology to suit the user. So for an analytics company like mine, our biggest competitor is Excel. And there is no way you
I
can
thought with the brain,
convince
the way
a user.
Sugam was saying, I think it was the mindset. But
Yeah, I agree. There's no way you can get users to say, to tell users, stop using Excel, this is a better tool. It's like literally go to hell. So change has to be percolated from the top down, of course, and it's a combination, like I said in my talk, it's a combination of patience, perseverance, but the top management effectively have to understand it's trickled down. So they have to first buy in, and if they buy in, then there has to be a carrot and stick approach. We look at, we earlier used to try and push our way through saying, stop using Excel. Now we don't do that anymore. We let them use Excel, but along with that, show them the additional value they'd get out of that, and coax them, cajole them to make the shift from Excel onto the new platform. And it's a process.
Microsoft somewhere is crying when you're telling people that. But
Sorry?
Microsoft is crying somewhere that you're telling people not to use Excel, but I think that's fine.
No. So I would say that, in the world today of software, which has been around for, let's say, 70 years, I think Excel is the best software in the world created, and probably it ties with Google Maps today.
Got it. So I think last one for everyone, I think we've done from Microsoft Excel to Power BI Analytics to POS to e-com to omni-channel. I think all of that for today is pretty much done, right? Adoption is a different thing, but it's done. I think let's go to each one of you all, starting from Sanjay bhai to Sugam here. What is the next thing that you're excited about in terms of serving your customer and using something new to serve your customer? What's the next thing that you're most excited about?
So the new thing for us is maybe not the new thing for the world, but we are looking at, in the same breath as how Sugam also mentioned, that kind of create an opportunity for the consumers to know about the product without any help from the store assistants. I think that's one very important area, and I think some intervention over there is where we are planning our next journey towards. Just as an adjoinder to one topic that was being discussed on data, I just feel, and I have a qualification over there, that businesses like ours, which is more about tomorrow than past, over-reliance on data is kind of going to make me a clone of what I was earlier. So somewhere I think brands which are dealing in fashion, the reason why consumers buy into those brands are not for what they did yesterday or what they plan to do tomorrow. And very few data points will throw up as to what's going to happen tomorrow. So I would probably walk cautiously and tread cautiously there. What not to do probably can come from my past, but what's gonna be done tomorrow has to be a gut call, and otherwise there's no point in being in this industry because you're just taking away all the fun out of it.
That's a good one. That's a good way of putting it. Niraj, what are you most excited about?
So analytics as a function, most retailers will agree, is largely consumed in the head offices, the back rooms, etc. What we are doing is with some complementary products that we've launched now, we are getting information to the people who are actually interacting with the customers. So again, this is something that you mentioned, that customer, when he walks in, he does not want to interact with technology, he wants to interact with people. But the salesman who is serving him can use a lot of technology. So what we are doing is creating shop floor assistant apps, which actually dispense minute-to-minute intelligence, that this person has walked in, his last purchase was, this leather-soled pair of shoes. And, that's enough to start a conversation.
All right. Anshu.
Next big thing is to understand the customer a lot better. Now that we have the data of the customer, the next big thing is to segment those customers into various, a discount seeker or a bag buyer. So segmenting them and then kind of targeting the communication accordingly. So 70% of our business comes from our repeat customers. So getting more customers into the foray and also accelerating the customer experience initiatives. So that's something big that I'm looking forward to.
Got it. Nissan?
I think a availability of data storage is an amazing thing that we underestimate, right? So now we have 12 million customers in our database. And I think the time has now come where we can track them, or we will like to track them, when they interact in our stores, most obviously, or on our website, we get that. But also how they browse and what they're browsing and what's their social media posts look like. And I think that's where the data becomes a little bit more predictive as to where the customer is today, and you can see that shift happening. So it's not a data of, you know, something that happened 6 months ago and it's a singular point of view. He's right, that could be very dangerous. But if you're getting a 360 view, because now data storage, data access, integration is all happening in technology, I think that makes it a very exciting time. So it's not a singular technology that I'm going to say is amazingly wow. I think it's a combination and the ability for us to collect, store, and then integrate that data and then analyze that data that makes it amazing.
Nirmit?
Yeah, so for us, given we are a hiring platform, the next big thing is going to be like, how do we go towards more skill-based or skill-driven hiring? And not stopping there. Whenever we see a skill gap, how do we go and work with the corporates and reskill the people so that the same workforce can learn and learn faster and be more productive on day one? Thanks.
Bertram?
The way I see this unfolding in 5 years forward, if I were to wear my innovation hat, is physical tech, assisted tech, and digital tech. The three different kind of intersections or experiences. Physical, I think we know it's been there, done that. A lot of small incremental changes, but assisted tech, I think one of the panelists spoke about, there's a lot more to do there. And I think getting that insight of your customer in real time is gold. I think that's something which most brands would start working towards. And in digital tech is where I'm placing my bets personally, that today the customer is getting more accustomed to the channels and the omni-channel experience around him. You look at the impact COVID has had on the banking industry. Being an ex-banker, I can tell you that today our number of times we visit the branch has declined immensely. And I think you only have a few people who do not trust the digital channels who still walk into the branch today. Look at that and apply it to the retail sector. I think there's going to be a huge amount of shift in consumer behavior in the next 5 to 10 years. It will be incremental. And I think technologies like what we are contributing towards the ONDC and a lot of other experiences like your immersive virtual reality and other stuff will allow brands to connect with the consumer, not just on their own platforms, but also on third-party platforms. So I'm very excited to see how that shapes up a marketplace like Experience in future, where you can go to the marketplace and say, hey, let me know what I should buy. This is what my broad requirement is. And it gives you a whole recommendation based on the intelligence it has around you. So that's something to think about. And we are building the blocks, like I said earlier, not necessarily the marketplace. And we're powering that experience. And the only way to do it is interoperability, standards, and building it for real scale.
Sugam?
Quick 2 points. I think the first is how to make the customer journey more seamless and easy. There are a lot of, we've talked about omni-channel and how difficult it is and all of that. So I think this journey has already started and we are evolving. But eventually, it should become far more seamless than what it is. And for the customer, it should be as easy as buying here and picking up there and then returning somewhere else. So that's the first part. The second is, as brick and mortar spaces become smaller in the sense every mall is trying to fit in more brands in the same space. How do you bring about more choice for the customer within that small brick and mortar space by the use of technology? Is the second point that I had in my mind.
All right, thank you everyone. We're up. That's a wrap, I think, from all of us. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and views. Thank you to the audience for hearing us out patiently.